Metallica's Master of Puppets album is a perfect metal album of sort of modern times. Starts with an acoustic intro, then all hell breaks loose. The first song is called Battery. Sort of a product of its time, I guess, of the 1980s. So there's songs about TV evangelists and war and cocaine and whatever, but it still sounds absolutely perfect today. Just a mix of absolute sort of crushing brutality, which is from their thrash roots, with a lot of really sort of intricate, intelligent guitar parts, fantastic musicianship. There was a band that, an album that sold 1 million copies sort of in their first year, brought them into the mainstream, and really I think ushered in a new age of metal. Sort of, they were the band that sort of transformed metal in the mid-80s along with Guns N' Roses, and still stands up today as, I'd say, one of the top 3 albums ever made.
Pearl Jam's 10 for me was just such a massive sort of moment in my life, because it was one of the first rock albums that I heard that really seemed to sort of speak to me, and I think it speaks to sort of any kid who's grown up with a sort of disjointed family situation, or any kid who's ever grown up that just thinks sort of the world's a mess. And Eddie Vedder just had a lyrical way that basically spoke to all those sorts of people. And meanwhile, the music was melodic, it was heavy, really heavy in places, it was really beautiful in other places, and it just sort of had that bit of everything that just made me feel suddenly rock music was really for me. So that's why I think Pearl Jam is one of my favourite, certainly probably my favourite band of all time, and that album is one that I'll still keep going back to again and again.
I'd probably say Blizzard of Oz. That was an interesting one because Ozzy had just, he'd been kicked out of Black Sabbath. He really had something to prove on that album, and it was Randy Rhoads, and him at his finest. And I just think, and the band, it didn't sound like a backup band playing for Ozzy Osbourne. I mean, that really sounded like a band. And the songs are great, the riffs are great, the solos are amazing, the vocal melodies all sound good. To me, Blizzard of Oz has like everything you could want in a heavy metal album, as a fan and as a musician.
Led Zeppelin 2.
Why would that be, Mickey?
Because I loved it. It was a great album. I mean, because it had still had the blues influence from the New Yardbirds and the early Zeppelin. But great songs, great production, great playing. It just stood out for me, that album. Even at the time, I was listening to the Allman Brothers and people like that. Led Zeppelin 2, for me, is a standout rock album.
I think Electric Ladyland. Even though Hendrix was American, I think of him as being a Brit, really. It's, he was recorded in America, but I think the approach to the songs, even especially when he covered stuff, and the guitar is just still another world. I think probably Electric Ladyland for me.
I think the one album that sums the whole metal thing up would have to be Masters of Reality. And that's Master of Reality, isn't it? Can I do that again?
Okay.
I think of any album that sums up heavy metal, it's got to be Sabbath, Master of Reality. I think each song is like we knew what we were doing then in the studio. It's the third album. We've been on loads of tours. We were well drugged up. And it was just every song was like we knew exactly what direction we wanted to go into on that album, because we knew it was successful then. So we had all the confidence and everything. And we just thought, well, we've done a couple of heavy albums, let's do a real heavy album then. It's just every song's really, really heavy.
Yeah, I think probably Aerosmith rocks. And it's just one of those records. Every time I listen to it, I think that to me was the epitome of Aerosmith's career. That was their swan song, that record. And they were just so on their game. They were on a few games at that point, but.
Pantera's vulgar display of power definitely. I think that the whole circle of what metal to me is. Earlier stuff, of course, any Sabbath album. Later stuff, Us, Slipknot, System of a Down. Earlier, like thrash kind of stuff. Because I can't give them one. Stormtroopers of Death, SOD for thrash kind of stuff. Sepultura, that's a good rounded out. And Motley Crue for one of the glam, kind of hard glam stuff. There you go. Wasn't one, but one from each genre of metal because there's so many different ones.
Swans and Holy Money was an absolutely life-changing record for me. Read a review of it. It sounded like the most horrific thing that had ever been made. Went straight out, bought it. I was 16 years old. Put the needle on the record. Just wasn't prepared for it. I couldn't believe that someone had made a record like that. No, you can't do that. That's not allowed. It was something just so arid and seemingly dead about it that I just couldn't get my head around it. It just really chilled me to the bone, and it's almost like the first time you see something like Faces of Death, is that you just want to keep going up against it to test your own instinctive reaction from it. Like, it literally chills your blood. And so I put it on before, I put it on the evening, work up in a cold sweat. I used to go, I made a tape of it, used to go to college, and trying to get my head around it, just becoming more and more obsessed with it. And it was just so physical, so just so immune to anything else as sort of its own sort of completely enclosed world. And I think, and that really opened me up to something that seems inhuman, and yet the more you listen to it, the more it really kind of it resonates so deeply with something really, really human about you. And I think that really opened me up to a lot of what metal is about.
As you're asking me this, I won't say Hendrix because I know Ken will say Hendrix, and I'm not going to take that off him. So I'll say any early Deep Purple album for me was the epitome of metal, and it really set a massive precedent.
I'm going to say Are You Experienced because that's the thing that changed my life, and I think like most metal fans out there would have to agree. Something does happen, you either hear it or you go and see a band and you just go, that's it, that's your journey through life. I think that you get that injection and nothing can, maybe up until that point you thought you were supposed to listen to what your big brother listens to or your parents or your sister or something. But if it happens to you, that's when you become a heavy metal fan, and that's when it happened to me when I first heard Are You Experienced.
Favorite metal album would have to be Deep Purple Made in Japan. I think that everything on it is just the beginnings of a recipe for something that was beyond them. And Speed King, Smoke on the Water, The Mule, Highway Star. Oh fuck, what an album. That was fucking brilliant. Melodic, heavy, soulful, swinging. Why can't music be like that anymore?
Definitely Ride the Lightning by Metallica. Definitely one of the best, it explains metal to me personally, because definitely that was like the first Metallica record that I really, really like listened to, and it was so different from Kill 'Em All. Like Kill 'Em All was like way like thrashy, and Ride the Lightning had was a little slower, a little more thought out, and definitely had great guitar on it. Definitely some amazing solos on it, and definitely the drumming was pretty good too. So that is a great metal album.
I would say SOD's Speaking You Shall Die is probably the genesis of what is going on today in metal. You have a mixture of hardcore and metal together, which a lot of people don't realize, but all traces back to bands like SOD. And even if you don't like hardcore or metal, you'll love the lyrics. They're the most satirical that you'll find and gut-wrenching. So I encourage you to go out and buy SOD, Speaking You Shall Die.
So I would say Rain and Blood for me is like the definitive metal record. It's 28 minutes long. It's just grabs you by the throat from the first second it comes on to the last second it goes off. That record's really perfect in every way. There's nothing that could be better about it. To me, it defines metal. It defines the intensity. It defines just everything great about metal is in those 28 minutes. It's just like a 28-minute crash course in why metal is as great as it is.
I think in terms of a heavy album, particularly one that kind of started the whole thing off, maybe Led Zeppelin 2. I mean, that's more towards my kind of taste of blues-influenced heavy rock.
I would say one album that always sticks with me that I never got tired of listening to, mainly for the title track, is Every Picture Tells a Story by the Faces. You know, because Faces were a great band, and I mean, a lot of Gus Rod's still around, and his image is quieting down a bit. After all, we're all getting a bit older, but he's still, I dare say he's probably still the same old Rod. Because I mean, I know I'm still the same old Filthy, although I've got grey hair, and the physical side of it changes a bit. But in here, I'm still the same, and I'm sure Rod is as well. And that album to me was that meant a lot to me when I was in my early days, just because I loved the lyrics, because I've always been a great fan of lyrics and stories, and I thought that particularly the title track just describes a lot of things that you go through in your youth really well. I mean, at the time, that I remember thinking, fuck, that's me. Except for the the slant-eyed woman,
All right, I'll have to say that British Steel from Judas Priest, to me, if I had to pick one heavy metal record, British Steel would be the epitome of heavy metal. I could argue with myself all day long and talk about Sabbath or Zeppelin or other bands that came before Priest, but I think what Priest did, and specifically on British Steel, was whatever the last shards of the blues that may have been hanging around, those little shards were completely wiped off. And it's the first record to me, if you go chronologically through the history of metal records, but British Steel is the one that just, to me, stands out as the gem, as the one that's just the most pure, crystalline, unadulterated heavy metal, the first one. Because I'll argue with you till the end of time, well, you could say this one, but there's still a huge blues influence on a lot of that stuff. Whereas to me, British Steel, even the title, I mean, it doesn't get more metal than that record.
Pantera, Far Beyond Driven. Pantera opened my eyes to this whole thing of what metal could be, and I'd never heard anything like them when they came out. And that album is just so over the top, but yet still has hooks, and it's awesome.
Power groove, man.
Yeah, Pantera was absolutely the shit, man.
I'm gonna say Korn, self-titled. Their second record, I guess, '94. Pissed, revamped metal, brought it back to the masses, tuned down, just anger, freaks, love it. That's metal.
Oh, Zeppelin too, because I mean, Jesus, heartbreaker. The songs and the delivery, they're so simple. It's powerful and it's clean and it's dirty. I mean, that would do it for me. Zeppelin too, without a doubt. It's just the epitome of drums, bass, guitar, and a singer. The format which we live to this day, and always will.
Well, I think that probably there's lots of great albums. I think it'd be hard to find one better than Back in Black.
This is for both of us, probably our whole band, but I think I've already said it a million times, but Appetite for Destruction.
Yeah.
Because we were very young when it came out, and it really changed my perspective of hard rock. Mm-hmm. And it made, I think, even to this day, like, the fact that the producer is not like one of the bigwig heavyweight producers of that time, and like the way it sounds, like to me it just sounds like it was recorded in a sweaty, it sounds like it was recorded at the Whiskey. Like it just sounds like someone just put a tape recorder up. Mm-hmm. And it's really raw, and I don't really think a lot of metal records, like sometimes when bands are too metal it just gets so sterile. Something about that record just sounds completely live, and it's like, it's not perfect, and that's why I like it. I think that that's part of the thing about hard rock, is that I like when it sounds drunken and sloppy, mm-hmm. not too sloppy, but just on the edge, and to me that record is like, it symbolizes all that. And, you can hear all the influences from before. You hear like the Led Zeppelin, and like the Aerosmith,
right,
AC/DC, but it doesn't sound completely derivative and stolen,
Wow.
One of my favourite albums is Sgt. Pepper's, actually. I know it's not a rock album, but it's one of my favourite albums.
I'd go with that.
It's got that old English thing to it with some real great, like, pushing the boundaries of the future with it, and it's still, to this day, if you put it on, it's like, my God, it's mind-blowing, And what was that, 1969 or something?
Yeah, you said it right. It was the one album that came out that just blew everybody's heads apart. And you listen to that and you think, God, man, how did they do that?
It really don't get much better than that, does it?
How did they even think of that?
A metal album would be Black Sabbath's Black Sabbath, released in 1970, probably the blueprint for every doom-laden heavy metal band that has graced a CD or vinyl ever since.
Megadeth, Rust in Peace, because there's a certain element of just brilliance, and every moment they're just doing something that you're just like, how the hell do they do that? Or just like, how did they write that? What were like, you think about, what were they thinking when they wrote this, when they played this, and then when they were listening to it, when it was done, they were like, God damn, we are some bad motherfuckers.
Far Beyond Driven, Pantera, just because, I don't know, to me it's just the most, I mean, it was extreme, at a time when bands weren't extreme like that. I mean, when I first heard Phil Anselmo scream like that, it was so extreme. When I first started listening to that, I had to put the record down for a year and come back to it later on.
Painkiller, Judas Priest, because that's fucking all out, total heavy metal. You can't beat it. His voice is absolutely fucking awesome on it, and the drumming, the guitar playing, the sound, it's having it. It's like any kid who's going to actually, like, never heard a metal record in his life, and somebody slaps that on there, like, they're going to be like, fuck me, what the hell is this? Because when I heard it, I couldn't believe it was the same band.
UFO, no heavy petting. Just track to track to track, great playing, great singing, and such. That's a band that does not get the credit in the United States that they deserve. In the UK, they get a bit more appreciation. In the United States, West Coast, big UFO fans. UFO used to play in Coliseums on the West Coast. But on the East Coast, it would be theater-sized venues. And too often, I fail to mention the importance of that band to me. When people say, what bands influence you, it's always, Sabbath, AC/DC, Alice Cooper, Led Zeppelin, I give them those three. And I forget that I own, like, every UFO record.
Slayer, Show No Mercy was just the record that really encompassed the beginning of all of heavy metal for me. The first note I heard to the last note to this day, it's just the record that really kind of means heavy metal to me.
It would be Led Zeppelin 4. It's the epitome of everything that a rock guitar player should be able to do with a guitar. You should be able to make it groan with agony and then just sing with pleasure for solos where you can do things that are melodic and you can hear the solos in your dreams, when you can be walking down the street and the lift in your step is coming from a particular drum beat or something like that, and when the vocals come in and you just know you're in the presence of a rock god.
The album that made me cry when I was young, which is Are You Experienced by Jimi Hendrix. And it may not be considered a heavy metal record, but it's still, I can't tell you how many Fender Stratocasters are sold every year, you know.
Ace of Spades has to be the ultimate kind of a party record for me, really high level. I don't know, it's kind of like audible methamphetamines. Really, really happens for me. Still does. I mean, whenever I take time and work out or do anything in my basement where I don't not sit behind a computer or need to think, that's the record that usually rears its ugly head or does so, let's say, 24 times a year, still to this day. So it's probably the one for me.
No Sleep Till Hammersmith is one of my favourite albums, and I think, you know, one of the greatest metal or rock and roll albums, because it's live. It's the only live album in the history of the UK album charts to actually go to #1, and I think it's so important. If I was to tell anyone who'd never heard any Motorhead to go and buy one album, it would be this one. And it's the fact that it is live. The live forum for all of the bands and the whole genre of music that we're discussing is so important. And this album, you could play this album quietly at home and it would still sound loud.
I couldn't pick one. I mean, I really couldn't pick. I could probably pick three. I couldn't pick one because one is so limiting. Within the sphere of my sort of rock and roll music, I could probably pick 3 albums that were important. Are You Experienced? Hendrix. Disraeli, Gears, Cream, and probably Zeppelin too.
What have those records got though?
They've got their own individual stamp of authority. They're totally 100% themselves. They're not hearkening to anybody else, and all totally different, you know, but each one magic and just as vibrant if you put it on a turntable or a CD player now as they were 35 years ago. They've still got it.
Okay, well, I think the Beatles' White Album, that'll always be probably one of my favourites, because you could see that in there they had parts of songs that they just put together and they said, well, we can't just throw that away, but it's not a whole song, is it? No, but it's good just that little bit. You know, that album I play today, I play every day, you know, and my daughter who's 21, she plays it too. I mean, she loves it.
My favorite album I would take with me on the island is Physical Graffiti, because that's the album which you can see Led Zeppelin on its best. It's no hit on it, but the whole album is a hit.
My favorite album would be Led Zeppelin 4, because it was so inspiring. A band that plays great rock riffs like rock and roll, or fantastic ballads like Stairway to Heaven.
My favorite album, the one I would take to the Lonely Island or the Lonely Party, is Electric Ladyland by Jimi Hendrix. I still, when I hear like All Along the Watchtower, on sometimes you even hear it on like classic rock radio today, it blows me away. It is like almost 40 years ago and it sounds amazing. And songs like Voodoo Child or Gypsy Eyes and, you know, all of them, the whole lot. It's a double album. That's what I would take.
It's not my favorite heavy metal album, but Slayer's Rain and Blood is the album I would play The Martians, just so that they knew what the parts were, how it was all supposed to be, and then they could go out and buy, you know, another 3,000 albums.